everyone, welcome to our November virtual tour of the California State Railroad Museum. We are located in the California State Railroad Museum in Old Sacramento State Historic Park in Sacramento, California. My name is Rachel, and I'm going to be presenting today with Debbie and Jake. So for today's virtual program, we're going to be taking you on a virtual tour of this car that you see behind us. This is the Cochiti Dining Car, and it was a first-class dining car that traveled across the United States from the 1930s to the 1960s. So for our program today, we're going to take you on a virtual tour behind the scenes, and you're going to get to see some things that visitors to the museum don't normally get to check out. So Jake's going to give you a tour of the kitchen at the Cochiti. I'm going to show you what it was like for passengers dining on the Cochiti, and Debbie's going to show you some of the menus and items that you would have been able to order on the dining car. And then finally, we're going to have a special tasting panel that tried out some of our railroad recipes. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll get started.
So we're going to go on a quick tour. As I show you off the kitchen, I want you to think about how this kitchen's a little bit different probably from the kitchen you have at home. So we're going to look for those differences. If you see any differences, go ahead and put them in the Q&A for us so we can see how this is different from the kitchens you guys are used to. One thing I noticed that's different from my kitchen at home is that it's all made of stainless steel. This is a little bit nicer than what I got. I don't usually see homes with very much stainless steel. I also see pots that are way bigger than what I have. This pot is almost big enough for a person to fit in there. So I think that's pretty neat. It makes sense if you're cooking for all these passengers, you're going to need some very big and heavy duty equipment. I couldn't find it, but I am told there is an ice cream cabinet somewhere in here. I'm very disappointed I can't find the ice cream. Unfortunately, at home, I also don't have an ice cream cabinet. I have plenty of ice cream. But I don't have a cabinet just for it. So I think that's pretty neat. Something else I see that's a little bit different from what I got, these floors are a little bit less stable than what I have at home. I think this is so they can pull it up and clean the floor a little bit easier than what you would have at your regular home. Well, now we've seen some of the supplies in the kitchen, sort of an idea of what it looks like. I want to talk about the people that worked in this kitchen. There would generally be 4 people working here. We have a mannequin of one of them. This guy looks like the head chef. That would be the person, the manager in charge of the kitchen, making sure that everything runs smoothly. In addition to the head chef, there would be 3 cooks in this kitchen as well. And it is a fairly small kitchen. I'd like to point that out as well. It's very thin. It's half the size of a rail car, essentially. So you don't have very much space to move around, meaning that these cooks would have to be highly trained to make sure that they're able to do all the work that comes with feeding up to 300 passengers and crew in such tight quarters. Each cook would have very specific duties. You would start generally as cook number 3 and then work your way up to cook number 2 and then cook number 1, each time having a little bit more responsibility and a little bit more pay associated with it. Something else we should mention when we're talking about the people that worked in this kitchen is that the 2 main jobs we're talking about, the cook and the chef, had very different folks that could be those positions. So for the head chefs, generally they would be people that had high-class dining experience outside of the railroads. They had already been restaurant industry people prior to coming on board the trains, and predominantly these folks were white. When we're talking about the cooks, predominantly the cooks were Black Americans, and there was extreme discrimination in preventing cooks from eventually becoming head chefs. So that is an important part of this story as well. Part of that was discrimination from the railroad companies themselves, not wanting to promote folks in place, but also that experience that I talked about, head chef had to be somebody that worked for a high-class dining institution before coming on the railroad. And because of that experience requirement, many Black Americans weren't able to become head chefs. So now that we know about who was working for the kitchen, Let's talk a little bit about what that experience would be like. As we talked about, we have a really big pan here because you need to be able to cook for up to 300 people a day. That would be breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 14 to 16 hours at a time for these shifts. And you wouldn't have days off. If you're on the railroad, you're working all the days through. You'd get up at about 4:30 in the morning to start firing the stoves. These stoves are not like the stoves we generally have at home that can turn on really quickly. They require a little bit more time to heat up than what we have today. So you'd be getting up really early in the morning, cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner for all your passengers, the entire crew. And generally the cooks and the chef ate last. So after making all the food for everybody for the day, then they could enjoy their meal, have a couple hours to relax and sit, and then they would be back at it again the very next day. Something else that's different than working in this kitchen than it would be if you were cooking at your home today is that you're on a train. So it's rocking back and forth and back and forth the entire time you're on board. And if you're anything like me, I'm kind of known as a messy cooker at home. So I can't imagine trying to do all the stuff, cutting vegetables, pouring liquids into cups and things like that, all while having to deal with an uneven train that's rocking back and forth the whole time. So this was very difficult work, but they kept at it and created a fine dining experience for folks while they rode the railroad. So that concludes. I would like to point out as we're leaving the kitchen here, this is an extra special tour because generally folks are not able to access the kitchen when they come here in person. If you do come visit us, you can look in, but you're generally not able to go inside. So this is extra special for you guys this morning. As I come around here, we're going to get a shot. If you were, instead of working for the kitchen, if you were a passenger, this would be sort of your entrance into the dining car. And then one of my favorite shots, as we turn it over to Rachel here, is just look how beautiful this setup is. That's wonderful.
So some of you probably envisioned that the interior of the Cochiti would be a lot like the interior of maybe your favorite restaurant, or that maybe it would be like dining on a plane. But as you can see here, the Cochiti was a very formal first-class experience for passengers. So as you can see here, where Jake's zooming in, you had white tablecloths and really fancy china or dishes. So passengers who rode on the Cochiti often wore their finest clothes to dinner. It was a really fancy experience for these first-class passengers. So this is definitely a lot different than I would have expected dining on the train to look like. And I bet that a lot of you thought the same thing. It's a lot different than how we might dine on a plane or dine when we're traveling cross country today. So let's dive into why this was such a fancy experience for passengers and why it was necessary for passengers to have food on the railroads in the first place. So as the railroads expanded across the country and they went farther distances, passengers needed to be able to eat. And that was true whether they were traveling for vacation, family, or business. So this is a first-class dining car. So keep in mind that those visitors would have been paying the most amount of money for this experience. So this is really a fancy experience. However, everyone needed to be able to eat on the railroads. As trains moved further across the country, they made fewer stops and they were traveling faster distances. So it was more convenient to have food available on the railroad. Even though the trains moved and had very fast speeds, it was still a very long trip across country. So to meet the comfort and needs of passengers, railroads offered these meals on the railroad so that their passengers could be more comfortable. There was also a lot of competition between the railroad companies because they were vying for passengers' business. If they had really fancy dining experiences or were well known for their food, they might be able to get more passengers to travel on their line. All right, so let's go ahead and check out some of the different china here that's available in the Cochiti. If you come and visit the California State Railroad Museum, you can check out all of these dishes. Each railroad company made their own china for their passengers. If we go back here, you can actually see the dishes and china that were served originally on the Cochiti. So this would have been the china that was served on this dining car in particular. And this dining car served this china that was made by Mary Coulter, and she was a very prominent female architect who designed a lot of buildings in the Grand Canyon area. And you can kind of notice that her china and dishes were designed to look very similar to some of the architecture and themes that you would see in the Southwest. So as you take a look at some of the china here, think about which ones might be your favorite, or how maybe you would design your own china if you were making a pattern of your own. So we'll give you some time to check out some of the china, and then we'll turn it over to Debbie, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what it was like for passengers as far as what they ate on the railroads.
Well, hello and welcome. I want to talk to you a little bit, as Rachel said, about what was served on this car. And in particular, I want to focus on what would be served to children. This is actually a question we get with a lot of our presentations, is what would children have done, or what did the children experience? And this is one where we can really show you a lot about what a children's menu would have contained. So let me start out by asking you a question. And that first question is, when you go to a restaurant, what types of food do you like to order and eat? And I'm going to have you turn to the person next to you, parents share, talk about what your favorite foods are at your favorite restaurants. If there's a children's menu, what are the types of food that you like to order? So we'll give you just a few minutes there. Are you coming up with some great ideas? Are you getting hungry talking about all that food that you love? Well, I'm going to guess what some of you might have talked about in your groups. So are you all done talking about the food that you like? All right, let's see. I'm thinking maybe for breakfast, a lot of you said that you would like stewed prunes, maybe some hard cooked cereal, and of course some milk or cocoa to wash it down. Was I right? How many of you said that? I know there must be a lot of you out there that said that. And let's see, maybe for lunch, okay? If you're thinking about going out for lunch, maybe you said your favorite lunch would be a cottage cheese salad with dates and raisins, served with Zwieback toast and butter. And of course, then you would have milk to go with that. Did anybody say that one? I'm betting there were a few of you. And then, of course, for dinner, what would your favorite dinner be? Maybe a broiled lamb chop with a consommé, which is a brothy soup, and a green vegetable. Did I get it right? I'll betcha maybe not a lot of you actually did say those items. But if we can show you right here, there's an actual children's menu here. Can't see the inside very well. Let's look at the outside. Yeah, that's a children's menu that was from the Southern Pacific Railroad. And in 1937, it was kind of a really big deal to present a children's menu. So those things that I just mentioned to you are actual items that they served. I wanted to show you the cover of the Southern Pacific Bulletin to show how they were promoting the fact that they were offering children's menus. And we have the actual menu there. And this is what I made a copy of it so you can kind of see. It has a little poem. It says, "Now, just before you eat, please look at all the pictures in this book. It takes only 1 minute to introduce the people in it. And they have pictures of the people who might have been working for the railroad, as you can see. So a lot of times when you go to a restaurant, maybe you have a children's menu and it'll have fun activities for you to do. That's what they came up with. There was another one that showed you that one. And as I fumble here, it's stuck together. This one, we have the cook, Farmer Jones, Susie the cow, where the food comes from. So all these different things. You might also notice that the racial stereotypes of the day made a differentiation between that will be on the other one there, between the cooks and the waiters, who, as Jake was talking about, were primarily African Americans who were hired to do those positions. And you can even see that as evidence on the menus here. So those were some of the items, and I thought you might get kind of a kick out of exactly how much those items cost. If you were ordering your breakfast, you think I could be better organized at this, but children's breakfast would have been 25 cents. And as I said, you would have had pureed prunes, well-cooked cream of wheat or rolled oats. You might have also had the choice of having a poached egg on toast. That would have been 35 cents. For lunch, you might have had the option of that cream cheese or cottage cheese salad and maybe a soup and a scrambled egg. That was 40 cents. And then for dinner, that lamb chop or maybe a steak would have been as high as 50 cents, equal to maybe about $8 today. Each railroad had its own specialties, so this is what they hoped would attract people to travel on the railroads. By the 1930s, people were traveling in their cars. So if they were traveling in their cars, they weren't taking the railroad as much, and they really needed, the railroads wanted to encourage people to travel on the railroads. So that was another reason to have these children's menus. But I'm betting what you really were thinking about was maybe something like a hot dog, children's fingers. I almost said chicken fingers, no children's fingers. Chicken fingers, hot dogs, hamburgers, pizza. Those are the types of items you see on menus today. And I'm willing to bet that children in the 1930s probably would have liked to see those things on the menus as well. But think about the items that you like to eat and what it'd be like to travel on the train. They do still have dining cars on passenger trains today, and probably you would see items that would be more to the liking of children in the 21st century. So, speaking of food and sampling food, as Rachel was saying, we have a pre-recorded tasting panel of some very important people that work here at the museum who graciously said that they would try some of the menu items that Rachel, Jake, and I made for them. So stay tuned and we're going to show you that.
Well, hello everyone, and as you have already seen, the railroads served a great deal of really wonderful food to travelers. So behind me here, we have a very special panel who have volunteered to taste some foods that are from the railroad recipes. So behind me, I'll introduce them here. At my right is Claire, who is an archivist here at the museum. Carly, who is the manager in charge of special projects. Kim, who is the interpreter 3 for the museum. And then last but not least is Ty Smith. He is our museum director. We're gonna get started with one recipe here. By the way, they don't know what we are serving them, so their reactions are going to be very honest as you see if they like the recipe or not. And we're gonna start with Rachel, and she's going to describe what it is that she has made.
All right, so for our first recipe here today, this is a dish that was served on the Santa Fe, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. And we'll let our panelists go ahead and take a taste of it. and then we'll see if they can guess what some of the ingredients are that are in this dish.
I love the presentation.
It's chunky.
Very well executed.
We've got, yeah, it looks lovely.
It's better than I thought it'd be.
Are the chips handmade?
Ermaine, do you want my honest opinion of how it looks?
Yes.
It kind of looks like vomit,
Oh
but
no!
it tastes tasty.
Feels like in the guacamole family.
Yeah, it's definitely like guacamole family.
Yeah.
But it's like the 1950s version of guacamole, you know, like where you want to like stretch it out a bit. But it's delicious. It's a little saltier than like what we consider a classic guacamole, I think.
I think it's because it's cottage cheese, and cottage cheese is usually pretty.
Oh, is
salty.
it cottage cheese?
That's what it looks like to me.
Maybe like some
Would explain the
Chunks.
It's chunky.
cottage cheese, a little onion, maybe a little citrus tasting,
definitely some lime.
and then maybe like a something avocado adjacent.
And it's definitely like, I don't know if there's jalapenos in it, like a traditional like guacamole, but it's definitely not spicy at all.
Not
It's
even-
like
not even
more-
mild.
No, it's not. It's like more
Zero.
like it has more of that like cottage cheesy like sour like after, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got like a guacamole start,
Yeah.
a little bit of vegetable tomato in the middle, and then that like cheesy like under
And salt.
and salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's salt like in every one of those layers.
Yeah.
It's good though.
Do we think these are bell peppers or tomatoes in it?
I was gonna go with bell pepper.
I think they're tomatoes.
In it? Oh, the tomatoes are in it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also
And
love the
green onions.
presentation. Like I really
Presentation.
wanted to like
Yeah.
kind of eat it as like a wrap.
That's true. It's like one of those P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps, but
Yeah, yeah.
with green cottage cheese in the middle.
This is delicious.
Yeah, I'd eat this again.
Yeah.
Find a different way to present it, maybe. Although you did a wonderful job with the lettuce cups. I don't know if it's anything to do with the cottage cheese.
This recipe was it was pronounced in the cookbook as guacamole, is the way they listed it in the cookbook. And it was said to serve it on a wedge lettuce with a tomato. But they said you could also use it as a dunk mixture, which is why we provided the chips. But it had the avocado, tomato, green onions, chives, the salt, which really came through, pepper, and some lemon juice. So that was all of what was in there.
Wonderful.
It's delicious. I would finish it off.
Great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
tomatoes look really good too, so good shopping.
These are probably better than the tomatoes that they had
Yes.
perhaps on
That's
there.
true. They're good quality tomatoes.
Okay, this is the next dish that we will be serving. If we could see that. Everybody guess what you think that is? We'll hand these out. There you go.
Oh my.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And take a bite and see what you think.
Very, very,
Maybe what
very
you
green.
can identify.
It is
Yeah, very green.
like it looks like peanut butter. It does not smell like peanut butter.
Does not smell like peanut butter.
That smells spicy.
It smells like it's gonna be spicy.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
What is
The other one tasted better than it looked. This one might be the other way
Mhm.
around.
Can you
Not-
identify any of the ingredients?
I'm not enjoying this part of the train ride. We-
Maybe some cheese? Like crumbled up.
So some kind of cheese. You've tasted that. By the way,
Maybe
that's why
like
there's plain
some
celery and
horseradish?
cucumbers to cleanse your palate a little bit
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's a strong taste. I'm
Um,
sorry. What else did you taste?
maybe some horseradish of some variety. Like it's got some kind of aromatic something in it.
yeah.
I don't. Not a fan of this one.
It's improving on me.
Well, you're welcome to mine if you are so moved.
It's what is that flavor even?
Yeah, can you identify the flavor? There's a very
It's whatever
strong
flavor my
flavor.
face is making.
Yeah, my initial reaction.
There's a very strong flavor in there.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, the name of this dish is actually rainbow stuffed celery.
Oh.
And it is stuffed celery, rainbow.
Well, I got the celery part.
Okay, you got the celery, that's good. That strong taste that you're trying to identify is Roquefort cheese.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
But this actually had 3 kinds of cheese in it. So in addition to the Roquefort,
Yeah.
there's cheddar cheese
Okay.
and cottage cheese. So cottage cheese, we noticed, is kind of a
Yeah.
familiar ingredient. It was in a lot of the recipes. This too is a Santa Fe recipe. It's served as an appetizer.
Yeah.
Some of the other things that are in here, there are black olives, green pepper,
Okay.
pimentos, and that's about it. And malt vinegar, and then a little bit of, well, oil and vinegar, but it was a malt vinegar. And that is also not a very common ingredient these days. So
Yeah.
it took me 4 stores to find the malt vinegar because I really wanted it to be accurate tasting.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what both of these things tell us about maybe the difference in tastes from people who were traveling in the 30s, 40s, 50s compared to the kinds of tastes that we have now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, much blander. I used to want to travel through time, and now I'm not so sure. I think we maybe it was a culinary low point in our history. It's bland, sort of, or maybe it's not that it was bland, but the flavor came from these like kind of unctuous components of the
Yeah.
dish, like Roquefort. This
Which
cheddar
is like,
cheese's uglier cousin. Like
it's like cheddar cheese and blue cheese like had a baby. Like that's the flavor kind of. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And the Roquefort cheese was hard to find too.
Yeah.
That took me 3 stores to find Roquefort. So I was going to do just regular blue cheese, but I wanted it to
You were
be
committed.
accurate.
yeah, good.
So I'm going to turn this over to Jake, who made the third thing here to talk about.
Well, if you don't like it, we do have the next thing is what you can wash it down with. I'm going to
Okay.
steal yours to
Good.
show the camera. So if you were in the Cochiti Dining Car, this would have been made by somebody that knows how to make these very well. They're horse's neck drinks. And the lemons would have been peeled in such a way that it looks like a horse's neck. Unfortunately for you guys, you had me making it, not an expert chef. So you just have lemon peel and ginger ale and ice.
Well, ginger ale is my favorite, so I'm into it.
This one should probably taste the least weird.
The lemon is lovely. It's
Yeah.
refreshing in
Yeah.
the morning for
Yeah.
us.
Horse's neck or no? Welcome refreshment after the last dish.
Yeah, this was this was great. Yeah, it's got that ginger ale, lemon, citrus,
Refreshing.
and mostly the citrus is what you're smelling rather than like really tasting. It's really good though.
And I love ginger ale when traveling on airplanes. I don't know, maybe that carries over to planes also.
Yeah, rocking back and
Or
forth.
trains, yeah.
Or eating Roquefort cheese, rocking back and forth. Yeah. Either way.
Settles your stomach, yeah.
So overall, after tasting all of these, if you had to give it a Yelp review for these recipes, the first ever Cochiti Dining Car eatery.
Just for apps and drinks.
Apps and drinks. Yeah.
Say solid.
We're just gonna do
No,
apps and drinks.
I was gonna say solid fare, but be selective. So maybe, considering it's made on a train, I'll give it a 4 stars.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Take it.
Maybe a 3. It's not my style, but it wasn't bad.
If I was ordering off a menu, I would have probably just ordered the 2 things that I liked. So I would give it a 5-star for both of those dishes. And look at the high class china.
I do like the presentation a lot.
The presentation was lovely.
Yes.
This for me is a two-star dining experience. I didn't like it. I don't want it. For me it's a no. However, I will say, staff, the preparation staff, A+ effort, and if you want a nostalgic look into the past, this is the place for you. This is not the place for me.